Hello there! Welcome back to another episode of PreMed Playbook. Today we'll be going over the activity section and, to be more specific, non-clinical activities. So, the activity section, I just want to quickly break it down into these 4 points here. First one being, what do you do? So the activity section for both the AMCAS MD and the AACOMAS DO gives you the opportunity to list and describe your extracurriculars, work experience, research, volunteer, and so on, and demonstrate your qualifications and readiness for med school. And on the AMCAS, you can list up to 15, I believe. And on the AACOMAS, I think it's unlimited, but I would recommend that you don't do 50 or something like that. Secondly, is I consider the activity section to be what I would call a validation point. One reason for that is that on the MD application, you can list out of those 15, 3 of them as your most meaningful. And when you do that, you will have extra space to talk about it. And I'm going to go in more detail about the most meaningful experience in another video of its own, but I do consider the activity section and the most meaningful included with that to be the most important part of your entire application. And the reason for that is that I see it as a validation point. And what I mean by that is, if your personal statement talks about community service a lot, or you asked your letter of writer to really, focus on how you're passionate about a certain topic, you want the activity section to reflect those things. You want the activity section to show the AdCom, hey, you really do care about community service, or hey, you really are passionate about that thing, and I'm passionate because I participated in something, or I did community service of my own. So, the activity section, in my opinion, really backs up the things that you may be talking about in your personal statement, in your secondary application, what perhaps your letter of rec writer may write. Now, of course, you're not supposed to know that, but if your letter of rec writer is asking you for details about stuff, and you think you're going to write about that, you may want to have that kind of stuff listed in your activity section, just so it's a little bit more cohesive. The next point I want to talk about is quality over quantity. So you want to focus on the experience itself, not just how much of it you did. And I feel like applicants get really caught up in the amount of hours that they're doing, but the hours are important, but that's not what is super impressive, in my opinion. I honestly think that having a lot of hours could be a detriment to your application if you have a lot of hours and you can't properly articulate, what it is that you did or what you learned and so on. So don't become, hyper fixated on the number of hours that you did, but what you did during those hours. And lastly, what do you like to do? And what I mean by that is, you don't want every activity here to be what you think the AdCom wants to see. This application, you want to showcase you, and we already know that you want to be a doctor, and these AdComs already expect you to have clinical experiences and whatnot. So you want to use this section to also highlight qualities and facts about yourself that the reader may not find anywhere else. So, perhaps you're really into weightlifting. You're probably not going to talk about weightlifting, in your personal statement or in your impactful experience essay. So the activity section, is where you would showcase hobbies that you like to do, that, pertain outside of medicine. So, and that side of that side is also super important. remember that these ADCOMs, you want them to remember who you are. And all applicants applying to med school, for the most part, I would say at least 95%, are going to have clinical experience. So just because you're a scribe or an EMT, the experience itself, is not what's making you super special. Of course, those are great experiences and they're very important, but you also want to show ADCOMs the side of you that isn't expected. Whether you're an EMT, a scribe, medical assistant, dental assistant, whatever it may be, you're already expected to have clinical hours. You're already expected to have community service hours, though it's not expected for you to be a weightlifter. It's not expected for you to be a video game pro. Whatever your hobby is that you're really passionate about, the things that they aren't expecting to read when they open your application, you also want to highlight those. So don't write 15, activities worth of hobbies, but don't also write 15 activities worth of medical experience. Try to find a way to fit in, other authentic things about yourself. So moving on, these are 3 points that I want to highlight when crafting your descriptions for your activity section, and then we'll look at some of mine. So first is be clear, and you can also think of this as painting a picture. And what I mean by that is, when writing your descriptions, clarity is key. Admission committees read thousands of applications. They are going to, see similar experiences from various applicants. So you need to ensure that the reader knows what it is you did. And you don't want to confuse this with filling the section with descriptions of every single thing you did. If you did a lot of tasks, you can focus on 1, 2, or 3, but after reading your description, the reader should be better informed on your actual duties, your role, and so on. So you want it to be concise, yet vivid. That doesn't really leave room for confusion. So for example, we have this line in pink here that says, I assisted in a research lab. I would say this leaves room for confusion. What exactly did this person do in a research lab? There's not much substance here. So let's look at another example. It says, I conducted PCR and Western blot analysis to study protein expression in breast cancer cells. So in this example, mentioning the specific task you did does multiple things. For one, it demonstrates that you actually know what you did. And trust me, there will be people who have spent thousands of hours in research, and they're going to list that. And, there are going to be people who can't tell you what it is they did in a lab. And that's really important. I could tell you, like in my interviews, multiple interviews, that was a question that was brought up. They were asking me like, oh, what kind of techniques did you perform? What did you learn? What was the question? So these, the ADCOMs, they want to know that you know these things. So being specific when writing your descriptions really shows that. Secondly, this adds uniqueness to your application. And remember, our goal is to be remembered. We want to stand out. And, I'm sure many applicants are going to have research experience, but it's very unlikely that, it's going to be the exact same, discipline or question trying to be answered. So writing in this way gives the ADCOM the ability to say, hey, I remember, let's say this is Bob's essay. Bob, he did cancer research, now we are connecting cancer research and Western blot to Bob rather than just research to Bob. You want to connect, more and more unique things to your application. And, lastly, just finishing on this point, these schools, they don't know if you are a good fit for their school if, you only give them superficial details about the work you have done. So let's say the school Bob is applying to is really, really big on cancer research. They may say, hey, this person really is passionate about cancer research. We see they have experience in that. We really think he may be a good fit here. Let's give them an interview to learn more about them. And that ultimately is the goal. Moving on, highlight yourself. It's all about you.
No, this whole thing, all of this, it's all about me.
Your activity descriptions should focus on what you did, not just the general responsibilities of the role. Highlighting your individual impact makes your application more compelling and personal. You don't want to come off as just wanting to fill a checkbox. You may genuinely have only volunteered at a soup kitchen just to get some community service hours. But no one should know that but you. However, it will be obvious if you fail to articulate, your impact or the significance of what you were involved in or the knowledge you gained from being in that role. So, here's another example. Instead of saying, I volunteered at a clinic serving underserved populations, here's an improved version of it. I provided Spanish translations for over 50 patients, improving communication between physicians and non-English speaking families. So this new version showcases your impact and also adds a reflective piece about the, positives of, language, translation in medicine. So writing in this way shows ADCOMS why you're valuable in your role and how that experience shaped you. And this leads to my final point, which is telling stories and giving examples. Whenever possible, bring your experiences to life by sharing, a brief story or an example. Storytelling makes your experiences more memorable, and it helps the admission committees connect with you beyond just, numbers and titles, such as, they have 1,000 hours of clinical experience and they're a medical assistant. What story do you have as a medical assistant? That opens up a whole new layer. And you want to bring meaning to those numbers. So if you have 1,000 hours of, clinical experience, surely during those 1,000 hours, you have a compelling story that you can write about. As Dr. Gray from Medical School HQ would say,
the admissions committees are not going to accept you because you checked off all of the boxes. The admissions committees are going to accept students who they get to know and who they realize will be good students.
They get to know you through these stories. I do not care how boring or simple you think your activity is, whether it's working for the president or washing windows. Find a moment, just one moment, you can write about that allows the reader to see the task you performed through your eyes. In this example, let's read it right here. I help students with academic success. Now, let's rephrase that. I worked with a high school student struggling in chemistry, and after weeks of tutoring, he raised his grade from a C to an A. So, in this new example, what we have done now is allow the ADCOM to see the fruits of our labor. They can now envision you tutoring the student who is struggling and that you lended a hand to. And not only did you help them, you empowered them to improve their letter grades to an A in that class. The ADCOM has zero reason to envision what I just said in their head unless you give them reason, to think about that by writing about it. It's not the ADCOM's job to assume or make guesses about your experience. Whenever you can, give them a story or an example, something that, allows them to be more knowledgeable about you and gives them something to picture in their head. So, Now we're going to be looking at some of my own activities, non-clinical activities, and these are straight from my primary application. Nothing has changed except for some of the identifying information, like if I named a city or a school or a person, I may have changed that. But other than that, it's all the same. Now, I did use all 15 activity slots, but we're not going to go over every single, activity that I did. We're just going to go over 5 in this one, and I'll also put in timestamps in the description if there's a specific kind of activity you're looking for. And if I don't go over something or you have questions, just let me know. And I also want to note that it's going to be color-coded in pink, yellow, and blue, and it's based on the 3 points that we just went over. So if a sentence is trying to do one of these 3 things, I will have it highlighted. So here is one of my activity descriptions. I'm not gonna read this, but feel free to pause it and you can read it right here. And I'm also going to move to the next slide, and it may be a little bit easier to follow. So here it is again. So this is my activity description for me being a learning assistant. It's kind of like right below a TA at the undergrad school that I went to. So let's first look at the lines in purple. And the first sentence, within my first sentence, the reader knows one of the things I do. Immediately, they know that this guy, me, is involved in curriculum development and is also doing an additional task, which is mentoring students. Some of this could be in blue because I then give examples of what that mentoring looks like when I talk about, review sessions and helping them study for tests. So this could be blue, could be purple, but you get the point. Moving on to the line in yellow, I improved in work ethic and character, equipping me to assist students in their growth. This is highlighted in yellow because I'm highlighting myself. This serves to showcase my growth. I just talked about the work I did as a mentor in the previous sentence, and now it's time to tell the reader how that work has better shaped me. I could have continued that line for a little bit longer, but I chose to go for a reflective route and express the gratitude in my ending. Right here when I talk about the privilege to have strengthened this family. But there are many avenues that I could have went with when it came to this ending. So as you can see, nothing here is in blue. I don't really give a story. I do give some brief examples, but not a full-blown story here. Now, this description, me being a head learning assistant, this is one of my most meaningfuls. So I did know that I would be giving a story in there, so I didn't put one in here. But even if this wasn't one of my most meaningful, I wouldn't try to fit a story in here if I don't think, it's the best case for it. So, like I said, try to fit in a story when possible, but some descriptions, with the way you're writing, it may just be better to not have one. Next is me being a college application mentor. Once again, you can pause, or you can pause on the next slide. So in this one, there is a story. Starting in blue, I actually immediately thrust the reader into a story. With this first line, the ADCOM now knows why I'm even involved with being a college application mentor. I then use clear language in the lines in purple, right here, to paint a picture of what it is that I'm exactly doing. Which is, a review service for students' writings. I then give examples and continue that story with the next part in blue, where I explain how I actually went about providing that service. So I talk about seminars, I talk about the number of students that we had, mentors, collaborating with translators, just giving a whole lot of more details. But let's not forget that, we want to always circle back to us, to you, when we can. So moving on to yellow, so I highlight myself and show my impact by mentioning the fact that over 15 students have thanked me and my team. And continuing on that, I really want to highlight the importance of numbers. Whenever you can quantify something in your activity section, do it. So I mentioned that I arranged review sessions for 22 students. I mentioned that over 15 students have emailed us. Those numbers really help push the point you're trying to make. The ADCOM, like I said a few minutes ago, we don't want them to guess, or we can't expect them to guess our experiences. So what I mean by that is, if I say I helped, many students, the ADCOM may imagine, oh, that could be 50 students, even more than what it actually is. Or they may think that's 3 students, way less than what it actually is. But there's no way for the ADCOM to really know these things if you don't lay out those kind of numbers. So if you can lay out, quantify experiences. So I helped 10 patients, I lifted 5 chairs, I reviewed 15 essays, whatever it is, adding those extra details can really help push your point. The next activity I want to highlight, it's another mentorship program. Once again, you can pause right here. I think it's a little bit cut off, but you can pause right here, or you can pause right here if you want to read it. But similar to my learning assistant essay, I very quickly let the reader know what it is that I do. This is especially important when writing about activities that aren't super common. So if I was writing about being a waiter, I wouldn't really need to write I ask customers what they want from the menu. The ADCOM already knows, what a waiter does. That's a super common experience, and they have most likely had experience with the waiter themselves. However, in this case, me being the leader of a school program that has an acronym, things like that, I just want to briefly let them know, what exactly it is I do, because this is not common. And also this acronym in the name, if you didn't see it, it's listed here. So I don't just put an acronym here and never tell them what it stands for. So if you do, if you're part of a program or something that has an acronym, do make sure to actually list it out in the name right here. So similar to my LA Learning Assistant essay, I very quickly let the reader know what it is I do. This is especially important when writing about activities that aren't super common. So if I was writing about me being a waiter, I wouldn't really need to write that I ask customers what they want from the menu. The ADCOM most likely knows what a waiter is. Many applicants will have that experience, and that is just, of course, something that they most likely have had experience with themselves if they've ever gone to a restaurant. But in this case, me being a leader of a school program that has an acronym, they don't know what this is most likely. So here in purple, I just briefly let them know that I handle the curriculum and planning for presentations. And just very quickly, if you are writing about an acronym, program that has an acronym, make sure you do put it in the name. I originally had this name in my description, like listing it out, and it was just too many characters. So I would recommend, like, if you have like a very long acronym, just put it in the name for your description on the AMC. But moving on, once again, you want to remember to highlight yourself. And that does not always mean like, hey, look at me, aren't I just so wonderful? That's not what highlighting yourself always means. It also can mean that the ADCOM is just reminded that this is your experience. So I do that by drawing a comparison here in yellow between me and the students to help explain why I'm involved in CHAMP, this program. So here in yellow, I write, working with these inquisitive students resonated with me as I saw myself in them. Like them, I had questions about college and careers, and I aim to equip students with resources for their next life chapter. So this new information just adds some extra depth or context, and these activities are like onions, if I had to describe them, and these sentences are layers that just build, upon each other. And lastly, moving on to the line in blue, this is not so much of a story. I mean, it kind of is, but it's more so of just like a little anecdote that I put in there. And looking at this, I do think I could have done a better job trying to perhaps, include more detail. But this line just ultimately, it gives the reader something tangible. I have told them what I do in this program, I told them why I'm doing it, and then I finally show them some results. And results matter, and if you can ever share, something positive about what you've done, do that. So some people in our program, they got in internships, they got into good programs, and they've emailed us and told us, that they think CHAMP had something to do with it. So, I wanted to mention that in my application. And if you have something similar like that, where you've really made a positive impact, you of course want to highlight that. So this could also be highlighted yellow, since I am kind of showcasing myself, but don't get too caught up on the color codes here. Next, it seems the top part is cut off, but this is research. So this is my research description. Once again, you can pause here or on the next slide. So, to begin, I have seen many videos in forums about how to write your research, and when I was, writing my research description, I was, of course, going through videos, looking at examples, stuff like that. And from what I've heard, some people say, go for a story. I've heard others say, just list your task. I've heard other people say, focus on one particular project. I personally would say, try to blend all of that. So let's review my attempt. And, this is no way in any form perfect, but this is my attempt to kind of blend all of that. So in my first line, here in purple, I'm very clear, and I let them know what exactly it is I research, which is temporal lobe epilepsy, and this is in mice. And furthermore, I'm studying how it affects memory lateralized in the brain. And all that information is conveyed in this first sentence. And then moving on, I give some examples where I talk about scoring seizures, reading neuron activity, reading EEGs, and stuff like that. So, of course, labs do many things, and I've done many more things than, these three examples listed, but we don't have enough words. So I would narrow it down to, a few things. Now, rather than just listing my task, I do name a few, but I do it in a way to lead to my next point in yellow. And I'm not giving a story yet, but I'm setting it up while also informing the ADCOM about my role. So moving on to the part in yellow, this aids in the transition into my story, but it also centers it back to me. The reader now knows that not only am I in a neuro lab, but they know that, I'm super enamored by the brain, that I really like neuroscience, and that's why I'm in a neuro lab. Once again, we don't want to expect the ADCOM to guess about us. Had I not wrote this line in yellow about how much I love the brain's complexity and design, and my confidence growing, we cannot expect them to know that. So moving on to the story in blue, I do have a short story here, and out of all the activities you've seen from me, this is like the most story we've seen in an activity yet. Like, this is just a quick little line. This is a story, but this is the first one where it's like just like a full-on story at the end. So this story here, I elected to go for a story here, and I wanted this to be the majority of the description, because I have a lot of hours in this. I think this is like the most hours out of any of my experience. I think my artistic endeavors, I think that's the next one. I may have more hours than 1,600, but this is one of my most hour-intensive activities, and there's a lot to talk about. And if you remember earlier, I said, it can actually be detrimental if you have a whole bunch of hours, but then you can't really articulate what you did or what you learned or have a story like that. So I just really wanted to, put a story here to really showcase to these ADCOMs, like, hey, this experience really meant a lot to me. So this research experience is not in my most meaningful. So other than my secondary application, this is probably the only time I'm going to talk about research. So I did neurosurgery, a craniotomy on a mouse, and I really wanted the ADCOM to know about that because, I felt that is something really unique. And let's not forget that our primary goal is to make our app unique. We want to stand out. I want this to be Yushan's application. So if I have some major accomplishment or milestone or project, you should be super, or something that you're super proud of, you want to share that and put it there. And for me, it was this craniotomy on the mouse. I was super proud of being able to do that. It was very nerve-wracking, and it fit in. So that's what I elected for. And perhaps you really did, perhaps you don't have a story like that, but you really like the experience, shaped your opinion on some scientific discipline, whatever it may be. You just really want to show that in your research, because research is really important. I would say it's a borderline requirement now. ADCOMs expect you to have research. Residency programs expect you to have research in medical school. So research is really important. So I really want to share this one. And I think if you do have a story or a really proud moment, I know I said that you should try to blend them all, but I do think that the story or the project, like outcomes that you learn from it, whatever it may be, those do take precedence over just listing your task. But once again, this is your writing, so you can craft it however you like ultimately. But once again, you want to showcase yourself, and you want it to, like, when they're done reading this, you want them to say, oh wow, yeah, this is Bob's research experience. And that's what I tried to do when writing this one. So moving on, we have a artistic endeavor. This is classical music composing. This is a hobby that I do. And yeah, I was correct. This one does have more hours, a little bit more hours than my research, but this is a hobby, so it's a little bit different. Once again, you can pause here, or you can pause on the next slide. So for this description, it's kind of one of those descriptions where it's like technically a story, because I am just kind of like mentioning various parts of this hobby, but it's not really a story in the sense that, you know, there's like a clear start and ending. But I start this description by putting the reader into a scene. I want them to right away see my creative process. And I remember, my apologies, and if you remember, a few examples ago, I talked about the importance of numbers and being able to quantify stuff when you can. So here is another instance. In the second line, I put a 2-minute piano prelude would take 6 hours of writing. I could have just said a short prelude takes hours to write. But by using quantitative language, I can now more clearly highlight the composing process. And now the reader may think like, oh wow, 6 hours to write to write 2 minutes of music. That's a lot of that's a lot of writing, and that kind of reaction wouldn't occur if the reader isn't able to fully grasp the scale of what it is we're doing. And I did that by, using numbers, letting them know it takes me 6 hours to write 2 minutes. Now, sometimes you may want to be ambiguous. So in the sentence right before this, I say many nights were filled with feelings of inferiority and stagnation as I made countless revisions. So I want to focus on the last two words, which is countless revisions. I know that I have countless revisions here highlighted in purple, which is supposed to be clear. And this may not seem like clear language, but being clear, as I said, also just means painting a picture. It means allowing the reader to easily visualize what you are doing. In the context of this, story that I'm giving, I used the word countless because I felt that was more clear, because I am not sure that the reader knows what 25 revisions of a piano prelude looks like. So I chose not to quantify those numbers. I did 25 revisions, but 25 revisions, the AdCom may be thinking, what is 25 revisions? Did you completely rewrite it? Did you just change one measure? What is all that? And I don't really have the opportunity to add all that detail in it. If this was a 500 word description, then yeah, I could give a little bit more detail. But in this case, I wanted to use the word countless, which is more ambiguous, but it's more clear, in my opinion, in giving the reader something to imagine. Like, they could imagine, in my opinion, countless revisions of me at my desk, like scribbling, stuff like that. Like, that's what I imagine, and that's what I wanted the reader to imagine when I use the word countless revisions. So as we continue reading this description here, the tone is more and more negative. I talk about spending hours to write and, feelings of inferiority and stagnation. I talk about how this is not my job and, countless revisions, and it just adds extra weight. And continuing on that, this is an artistic endeavor I'm writing about. This is not volunteering. It's not, my job. It's not mentorship. This is supposedly my hobby that I'm doing because I enjoy it. So without question, the activity's effect on you needs to be talked about in this description. So I get really personal with this. I talk about how much it means to be to create something. So I don't just keep it negative. I talk about inferiority, stagnation, but like I'm letting the reader know that even though like I have all these feelings, and these are negative feelings that come with this hobby of mine, this is why I do it. So now, moving on to this part in yellow where I say the art of composing is filled with many emotions, but the one that drives me to pick up my pen and write is accomplishment. When I hear the playback of a piece I wrote, or when the comments on my YouTube channel or that of praise, I can't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. So now I'm talking about how much it means to me to be able to, create something, and how that feeling of accomplishment keeps me going. This hobby of mine, as we see here, we are getting near 2,000 hours. You don't want to have a 2,000 hour hobby and you can't explain why you enjoy doing it. Or it would just come off as disingenuous maybe. So, with a description for something like, composing, an artistic endeavor, a hobby, something that you're not expected to do, I would recommend that you get personal about it. What are you feeling? Why do you do this hobby? Maybe you're talking about how much you love playing basketball, and maybe you started to play basketball because your dad introduced it to you when you were 6. Stuff like that. You really want to show that in these hobby, artistic endeavor style descriptions. Okay, so that wraps up everything for this video. Just to focus on 3 main points very quickly. Number 1, be well-rounded. You want to use this activity section to showcase a side of yourself to the ADCOMs they would have not gotten to know. So once again, you're expected to have clinical experience, community service, leadership experience, and all that's important, but you don't want it to seem like you're filling check boxes. You want to be well-rounded. Do you have any, experience in artistic endeavors, like I just showed you with mine? Do you do exercise? Are you part of a book club? Whatever it may be, you want to show other sides to yourself beyond just, medicine and academics. Second is paint a picture or be clear. And once again, that just means using clear language, but don't confuse that with, being too overt, but trying to allow the reader to get a clear picture of what it is you're doing. That's what I mean when I say be clear and use clear language. And ways to do that are by telling stories, giving examples, and you just ultimately want to leave the reader with a better understanding of what you are and what you do. And lastly, focus on you. Always circle back to how you grew, what you learned, what you did. At the end of the day, you are what's most important, not the activity. So in the next video, this is my TikTok. I'm going to be uploading these on TikTok as well. And my email, if you want to send me emails or something, it should be in my channel information. But up next, we're going to be going over clinical activities. So we're going to still be on the activity section, but now we're going to be talking about clinical activities. Hopefully that video is much shorter than this one. I haven't got into editing this one, but I feel like this is going to be very, very long, so my apologies. But I don't plan to go over all the same details that we just discussed. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.